Well, welcome everybody to this third session of the virtual Pediatric Leadership Conference. We've run sessions, as you're probably aware, on Monday and Wednesday, and then today. There's been an amazing array of speakers and ideas and the thoughts that have come. And so today we've got some further speakers, but we've also, in the second session, we're sort of doing a rounding, summing up and thinking about where we go from here. But before I get into the session, can I just say that this is hosted by IPALA, and IPALA is the International Academic Leaders Association. You can see that you can scan that, and that'll take you into the IPALA website. We would encourage you, if you're interested, to join IPALA and get involved in its activities. So it's really about, as it says, they're empowering pediatric leaders in global child health. So that's our mission. So it's a great enterprise, and we've got all sorts of things going and running on, all on the spell of an oily rag, I might hasten to add. But we've got fantastic people involved, and it's a real privilege to be involved with IPALA. I'd just like to introduce Alicia, who's my co-chair for today's session. Alicia.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, Alicia's normally got lots to say. So let's get started with the first session. So I'm really pleased we've got Jackie Small, who's here with us. So Jackie is a developmental paediatrician who's worked for close to 3 decades in multidisciplinary teams for children with developmental disabilities. She was the president of the Royal Australasian College of Physicians and chair of the board from 2022 to 2024. So this is a very senior role, not just actually looking at pediatrics, but in fact 66 different training programs in the College of Physicians. So it covers all the adult specialties and addiction medicine and public health, all sorts of things. So Jackie's been president and chair of the board, so she's had a very senior role, and we've been very proud of her in that role. She, I know, is committed to serving the needs of children, and so hence her interest in being chair of the RACP. Jackie's also the senior staff specialist and paediatrician in developmental disabilities, and she's a clinical lecturer at the University of Sydney, and she's on the executive committee of the Australian Association for Developmental Disability Medicine. Jackie, it's a privilege to have you talk with us. I've really enjoyed watching your leadership journey, and it's a great honour to have you here. So thank you. Over to you, Jackie.
Thanks so much, Kevin. And I want to thank the organisers for pulling together the symposia over this week. I'm really looking forward to learning from others through this evening as well. I do want to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my deepest respect to elders past, present and emerging. In Australia, we're incredibly fortunate that our Indigenous communities have 60,000 years of uninterrupted history and culture that we can benefit from. The title of my talk today is Leadership, Who Stands to Benefit? And it's partly a rhetorical question, but I hope that you will get a sense through my short talk this evening about where my position is in relation to leadership and who stands to benefit. And I do want to acknowledge that my employer is Sydney Local Health District, and I've certainly learned a lot through my employment and contributions to Sydney LHD. So I was president of the Royal Australasian College of Physicians from 2022 to 2024 and had a long history prior to that, and I'll speak about some of those details shortly. So I'm going to tell partly my story from those 2 years, but also many of the other influences that have impacted my life and my role as a leader, and also some of the opportunities that I've had to make a difference. I thought very carefully for my first speech when I became president, and I was very conscious that one of the significant issues facing membership organisations, including my college, was a sense of disconnect. And I firmly believe that we can't feel connected or belong or pride in our organisations and who we're part of unless we really know them. So I wanted to tell something of my story. I wanted to encourage others to share their story and collectively recognise that would tell the story of who we were. And I tried to encourage that through those 2 years. I also acknowledged when I was considering standing for president that when I looked back over the presidents who had preceded me, I was nothing like them. Most of them were male, worked full-time, had an active and prolific research career, and an abundance of awards, including very senior national awards to their names. So I decided if I was going to stand for president, I would need to play to my strengths. So I'm talking about some of the things through this talk that really matter to me. Next slide. So the RACP is a very large medical college. It has over 31,000 members now and it's rapidly growing. These members cover pediatrics, adult medicine, 3 faculties, public health, occupational medicine and rehabilitation medicine. And they're spread across Australia and New Zealand primarily, but nearly 4% of our members are around the world. 12% live in New Zealand, as you can see here, and a fifth of the membership are paediatricians or trainees, with a current growth of paediatricians in the college of 3.8%. As a paediatrician, I held other roles as well, including chair of the board, chair of the People, Culture and Remuneration Committee, a member of the Finance and Risk Committee, and I was expected to contribute and be part of or attend a large number of other committees in the college. In addition, I was a director and member of the Council of Presidents of Medical Colleges that covered the 15 colleges in Australia. It was an incredibly demanding role, and I expected that it would be very busy with a lot of demands on me, and I knew I needed to draw on my strengths. Next slide. Looking at this slide, it looks like it was a linear, planned journey from my earliest days as a clinician or a trainee until I became president. However, it only looks logical in retrospect. Really, I consider myself as an accidental president of a physician's college. My journey was not planned. I did not see myself as a leader. I did not see myself travelling this journey to become president of a large medical college in Australia at all. I set out throughout all these opportunities and the different phases of my career and the opportunities that came my way to make a difference. And in doing that, I had further opportunities come, which I accepted as readily as I can. I worked as a clinician and I still consider myself primarily as a clinician, a developmental paediatrician who works in Sydney Local Health District in a community-based team. And in fact, when I think about what modern leadership requires of us in medicine, in health, and probably even much wider than that, I think that many of the skills and experiences we have as paediatricians, and in particular community paediatricians, put us in very good stead for the demands and expectations of a contemporary leadership role. The other aspect that I want to draw out is that as a clinician, I spent most of my time working part-time, and that was because I wanted to raise my children. That gave me some flexibility when I wasn't working to accept other roles, and a significant number of those roles came from my medical college, which provided a sense of professional satisfaction and contribution, as well as a balance to the demands and difficulties that I experienced as a clinician working in a developmental disability field, which was fraught with challenges because the system, the health system and other systems that my patients accessed didn't work well for them. So I found some of these other avenues gave me opportunity to have a voice. And in hindsight, the fact that I work part-time is something that has connected me to some of the other younger generations to enable them to see many more of the leaders, I think, reflecting their experience of working part-time. My experience and contributions to the college have been multiple. I've been on a large variety of committees. I've chaired a lot of committees, particularly paediatric committees, including the Policy and Advocacy Committee. And I use those as opportunities to build portfolios and policies that serve to represent our core values and our core areas, such as child health equity and Indigenous child health. And I'm very pleased that I had the opportunity to lead some of those developments. Of course, with many other experts, some here on this symposium this evening. I also had opportunity to lead multidisciplinary teams, which again I think also put me in good stead for a leadership role, working collaboratively and respectfully with a large variety of other allied health professionals, other medical staff, and increasingly with schools, who I found to be vital contributors to the health of many of the children I was seeing. I also had an opportunity to be president of the Australian Association of Developmental Disability Medicine. And even though we were a small organisation, I was able to make very significant contributions in Australia at a time when the country was ready to demand changes for the health of people with intellectual disability. Next slide. So, as you might have imagined, I was quite awestruck by the seniority and the eminence of many who'd gone before me. And so I looked around for inspiration and found some really key inspiration in the words of Eleanor Roosevelt, in which she said, "You gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you really stop to look fear in the face. You must do the thing you cannot do." That served me well when I was making the decision to stand as president and has continued to support me in some of the difficult decisions I've made. Next slide. I'm going to pick up 3 themes through this talk that I think were important through my time and are also relevant for the general discussions we're having this evening about leadership. Women in medicine, leadership itself, and complexity. Next slide. So as I've mentioned, I was daunted when I looked at past presidents. Only 3 of the 42 presidents had been women, and only 2 of those 42 presidents were paediatricians. So I was in a very small group of people to be president of the RACP. I will just make a mention of our first woman president, who was Priscilla Kincaid Smith, president 1986 to 1988. She's still revered and considered an eminent physician worldwide. Interestingly, she grew up in Johannesburg and was training to become an Olympic swimmer when she moved to London to study hypertension. After her move to Melbourne, she found that it was very difficult to get work as a married physician. She said, "Nobody wanted me. Married women were unemployable virtually." What a discouraging experience for her, who was a remarkable woman who became the first woman professor of medicine at Melbourne University and president of the International Society of Nephrology in 1972 to 1975. Next slide. So even now, we know that women make up the greatest proportion of the healthcare workforce, about 75%, and in many areas much higher. And yet the proportion of women who lead the health workforce is small in comparison. You can see in this slide, only 30% of hospital CEOs were women in 2021, and only 38% of state and federal CMOs were women. It was very clear at this stage that there would be insufficient change without active intervention to address the inequitability of women leadership in the healthcare system if we just waited for it to happen. This has been a driving motivation for me and certainly is for many other leaders in our health system. Next slide. So prior to my becoming president, I felt that we needed to build on the already growing energy and enthusiasm to address this inequity within the RACP. We undertook a poll in 2019 and got a rapid response of 6% of the members within the first 48 hours. This demonstrated that there was strong support for promoting gender equity in our profession and for the college to take a leadership role. This data provided support for us to continue to develop this area and to partner with the Australian healthcare leadership that I'll speak about shortly. When we launched this, Daryl Moyer, CEO of the American College of Physicians, attended and presented persuasive data about the beneficial impact for our health system, for healthcare and healthcare outcomes, where there's equitable leadership of women in our health system. Next slide. The data is growing that shows that gender impacts health outcomes. This is relevant if patients are treated by women, and there's data to show there's reduced mortality and readmission. We also know that women experience poorer health and different treatment just because they're women. And there's growing data, particularly in cardiology, but there's also evidence to show this inequitable experience, poorer health outcomes stretch across a whole range of health conditions. It's a driver for change. Next slide, please. Within the RACP, gender inequity persists in training. As you can see by the graph, the white dots on the right-hand side of the page show the proportion who are trainees. And in many areas of our specialties, of the 66 specialties that Kevin referred to, there is growing proportion of women as trainees. However, those professions, such as cardiology, that has the lowest proportion of women physicians, as you see by the graph on the left, also still are lagging behind, with in some cases substantially less than 50% of trainees being women. Next slide, please. The Advancing Women in Healthcare Leadership is a project that's a multi-million-dollar funding, has multi-million-dollar funding from the federal government. And it's being driven to advance women in healthcare and has a wide variety of partnerships driving this change and working together. So why do we need to prioritise gender equity in healthcare leadership? It's because it matters to healthcare outcomes. There's improved healthcare outcomes for all, improved organisational performance, and in any case, equity of leadership in healthcare reflects the general community and the workforce, and that in itself is a beneficial outcome. Next slide. As is the right of every woman to have opportunities to ascend through her career, gender equity is a human right. So equity and diversity in leadership, as you can see on this slide, leads to improved and more equitable health, social justice and healthcare outcomes, a more empowered workforce, greater motivation, improves board performance, and generally improves business performance, profitability and productivity. So there's good reasons to drive and improve women leadership in the healthcare sector. Next slide, please. It's clear that leadership is a result of, or involves a complex interplay of forces. And I deliberately use the word forces because it often feels like you're being tugged or pushed in a variety of directions. Sometimes it can be quite uncomfortable. It's recognised that skills and training are essential to train people for leadership roles. But the experience through our lives, through our professional lives, I think is also vital. This defines who we are, it provides broader connections and helps us learn about our values and skills as clinicians and leadership along the way. I also contend that our personal lives play a vital role in who we are. Who we are, often we've navigated challenges in our personal lives, we've learned how to deal with complexities, and we've also discovered how our values permeate both our personal and professional lives, and this stands us in good stead. So I think our personal life ought to be a key consideration in our leadership experience and roles, and probably be amplified more than we experience. So one of my training opportunities was the Oxford SAID leadership course. I would have loved to have gone to Oxford, but during COVID, I needed to accept that I would study it online. It was a really worthwhile program. This talked about our leadership purpose and really emphasised the authenticity and alignment. And that while we need to understand and articulate our purpose and possess the tenacity to demonstrate and consistently live this purpose, it also needs to align with the organisation's purpose. We need to embody both. So I really can recommend that to you. They also emphasise that leadership is changing. So from the early 20th century, for example, it was thought there was an inherent trait. Then it progressed through a rise of trade theories, and now we're looking much more at ability, where with knowledge, skills and abilities subsets, motivations, attitudes and behaviours are vitally important to how we deliver in our leadership roles, but also opportunity. And I think this is where I had a great opportunity, and many of us do. It means that none of us are born leaders. We have opportunities, skill sets and motivations and sets of behaviours that mean we can deliver to the values, skill set and the interests of the organisations. Next slide. Many of you will have seen this slide and can see a variety of both overt and more covert factors that impact all of us through our leadership journeys. One of the things that became, next slide, one of the things that became very clear to me was in fact the complexity of what we are being asked to do. We need to be able to predict trends and contexts. There's a lot of intersecting factors and dynamic forces at play that are often changing direction, and we need to be able to detect, anticipate and protect against the unexpected while delivering value to our organisation. These ripples serve as a metaphor for the disruptive elements. The Oxford program spoke about handling the way to navigate this is thinking systematically, being able to handle uncertainty and unpredictability, and really having a deep understanding of the interdependence of various factors we're faced with. Next slide. So I do think as leaders we need to be comfortable with complexity. Much of what we're needing to do is non-linear and uncertain. There are interactions and all the systems may be constantly changing and somewhat unpredictable. Sometimes it may even feel like chaos. Next slide. It certainly did feel to me like my role as president was a balancing act, balancing new approaches to training, competency-based training, the standards that we have to uphold, competing organisational and member demands, the changing expectations of external stakeholders, including paediatricians, and all of course, balancing the resources that we have available to us. Next slide. So the Oxford course also talked about organisational complexity that reflected the size, structure and use of digital technology, as well as introducing digital technology. But I'd also add to some of these organisational complexities the changing member expectations, particularly for those of us who work in member organisations. Next slide. It is emphasised that change is ever present in organisations. Sorry, I think we've skipped some slides there. Change is ever present in organisations. And I really like the quote from Machiavelli, which said, "It must be considered that there is nothing more difficult to carry out, nor more doubtful of success, nor more dangerous to handle, than to initiate a new order of things." So there's a variety of strategies that can assist, based primarily on participation, communication, facilitation and support of the variety of people who work in organisations. So I'm not going to spend any time on complexity leadership theory, and I'm certainly not an expert, but I do think it's very helpful that there's theories now to help us better understand complexity and organisational responses. At its heart, complexity theory for organisations recognise that leaders need to be enablers and are not the only driving force for success. So I've gone to a slide with a photograph, I don't know if you can see that, with the title of self-reflection. So I want to make a few closing, slide 25, I think that's it, thank you. A few closing comments. that are reflective, and I certainly encourage you to use self-reflection as a powerful tool for your professional, personal, and leadership development. This is a photograph at one of the events I hosted over the last couple of years with the president of endocrinology, an adult physician who I've got to know very well through my time, and found a lot of opportunities to benefit from her experience and the experience of other adult physicians. Next slide. As I reflect back to some of the words that I spoke at the very first speech I gave as president, some of these themes that were part of that speech, I think, have stood the test of time and continue to reflect who I am and what I wanted to achieve and demonstrate through my times as president. It was about caring for others. It was recognising that I was the same, serving excellence and the greater good of our community, college and health system, but different. I wanted to strive to make a difference, as I think we all can. I want to make sure that we know each other, listen to each other's stories, so we can truly work together in a collaborative way. And of course, I spoke about health equity as a driving force throughout my presidency for children, for adults, and including for people with intellectual disability. Next slide. My journey was a complex one. All of roles such as president of large medical colleges and many other leadership roles are extremely demanding. But sometimes there are more challenges than we expect. And I do think that there is opportunity for growth for all of us who have leadership roles. And I've thought these words from Murakami, from Kafka on the Shore, really had a personal resonance for me in some of my experiences, and I hope that you will appreciate them as well. Once the storm is over, you won't remember how you made it through, how you managed to survive. You won't even be sure, in fact, whether the storm is really over. But one thing is certain, when you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. That's what this storm's all about. So next slide, I'll go back to the question I posed at the beginning and ask you, in relation to leadership, who stands to benefit? And so my final slide, I think, speaks to me about really what leadership is and who is there to benefit. And these are the words of Martin Luther King. Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. An absolutely wonderful talk and so many very insightful points that you've made there, which I think we can all take on board. And, you know, I agree with so many of them. I think that's so relevant to this path that we're all on. You're getting a lot of applause from our audience online. So I'll take this opportunity to move on to our next speaker. And we'll come to questions at the end of this session for both Dr. Small and for our second speaker, Dr. Veretti. If you can, to the audience, there is a question and answer box in the top right-hand corner, which is a little speech box with a question mark in it. If you think of any questions for our speakers as we're going through, please feel free to submit these as we go, and we will come to those at the end of this next talk. So I would like to say welcome to Dr. Elisa Specchi Veretti. She is a paediatrician in Fiji at the Colonial War Memorial Hospital, and she is the head of paediatrics there as well. She's also the president of the Pacific Pediatrics Association and the Sub-Regional Pacific Chair for the SRVC and SRCC as part of the World Health Organization. She'll be speaking to us today about her leadership and health journey, and I'd like to welcome her on now to share her insights with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you for having me. So thank you for the opportunity to speak here at the IPALA Leadership Virtual Conference. As Jackie, I'll be talking on my story, my leadership journey, and on promoting leadership development in the Pacific. Next slide. So my role, my roles as a health leader in the Pacific include being a clinical director in a major Fiji hospital. I have that picture at the background. It's a major Fiji hospital and also the Pacific Hospital, and National Director for Child Health in Fiji for the last 7 years. I'm a pediatrician by background with special training in neonatal care from Melbourne, and I've enjoyed my life as a clinician for the last 27 years and can say it was all with passion. Because if it weren't, I would have left long ago due to the many long nights of being on call and standby for 24-hourly days and nights, 10 days a week, even when caring through my two beautiful babies. But as I reflect, my passion propelled me and gave me reason, strength, confidence to go on as I was focused on saving lives and helping others. It's just beautiful and satisfying to see a critical child who's been brought to your hospital walk again, get up and walk again and go home. And this focus has never waned. It's still here today. I manage a hospital of about 200 staff, and never a week has gone by without events. So it's always something to manage. And then in the community, we have our church and family roles to play. So you ask the question, how do we get to be leaders, or how did I get here? And the simple answer for me, if I were to put it simply, would be through great mentorship and open doors. It's vital to have great mentorship, but it's never that simple. However, I acknowledge and appreciate the various supports I've had in the last 2 decades. Next slide. I'm also currently Pediatric Pacific Association president, looking after child health in 13 countries across the Pacific, as shown in the picture there. I have a supportive team of 7 executive members from Pacific Island countries, a few of them women as well. And together we've just revamped this organization in 2023 after COVID. It's also a pleasant task as we focus on improving service delivery to our Pacific children through collaborations with Pacific Island country specialists in country, Trans-Pacific specialists, and our donor partners. It is again vital to have a very supportive and specialized team to continue such work. Next slide. My story continues as I'm also currently the sub-regional chair for 2 regional committees in the Western Pacific region, as you've mentioned. One is chair for the elimination of measles, rubella verification, and the other is eradication of polio committee, which looks after 21 countries in the sub-region. Again, I have a very supportive team together with a far-reaching secretariat with far-reaching resources. And this picture shows the 21 countries from North Marshall Islands and Palau to Pitcairn Island down south. A population of 3.5 million with 1.05 million children under the age of 15 years. So how did I get here as well? I would say again, it was through good mentorship and sponsorship, opening doors that opened opportunities for better and ongoing education, training, and exposure. 3 to 5 decades ago in the Pacific, these opportunities were open only to inherited leaderships, but now opportunities are open to those even born out of silver spoons. And these are additional and above our inherent IQs, supportive families, partners, and communities. Next slide. Then there's life-work balance reality. These are real-life questions in the minds of Pacific women leaders in our patriarchal societies. It's always been one male, one leader concept, and everyone else obeys or follows. even in our nuclear families. So how do we balance two leaders in a nuclear family, even with chatty children? The same situation is at work. We hear comments as women will not make good leaders because women micromanage, women are emotional beings, women take too much time off, and so forth. We're working in male-suited or male-designed environments and are expected to comply. In the community, we are to be followers of men. Then there's spiritualism in Pacific societies which impact our moral values. Next slide. So Pacific women are mostly spiritualistic, and hence their innate way of being respectful and obedient. And sometimes this may come off as being timid, fearful, or non-knowledgeable. But this is all part and parcel of our cultural attitude. They value these principles and uphold these very closely, as in this saying here. So it's daunting to become leaders in Pacific communities, women becoming leaders in Pacific communities, because it will be a behavior that's out of the norm. It's a changing one, but still it is looked at as out of the norm. Next slide. When we look at global literature on women leaders in the Pacific, it's scarce. It's mostly on gender leadership, and you'll have small reports like this one on women in power, parliamentary power, or public enterprises. And of note are 3 Pacific leaders that are there in the global front. The one's president of Marshall Islands, President Hilda. This picture is showing the Prime Minister of Samoa and Madam of Papua New Guinea. And what's common with all these leaders is that they were visionary leaders. There's a saying here that says, without vision, we all perish. This picture here is showing the Prime Minister of Samoa on the left and Madam Monica Palaus in Papua New Guinea, whose main work is in rescuing women and girls from sorcery in Papua New Guinea. And at the bottom is Dr. Lisi Tikundundua, a renowned pediatrician and who was my mentor, who really opened doors for me in pediatrics. Now, Dr. Lisi has also reached a regional level of participation in the Western Pacific region, being an RVC member. She is still around but has since retired, and I owe most of my work and leadership traits and values to her. Next slide. Yep, so I've just spoken about all these torchbearers in the Pacific, and there are others in the general arena. Konai Helu Thaman, who's a poet. We have vice chancellors of universities. And in health, there really isn't much, and hence I've shown a picture of Dr. Lisi. And these are their common attributes. They're quite intelligent people. They've had supportive families. They're resilient. They had competing partners, but all in all, they've learned that peace in the home helps a lot. Next slide. I think you may have missed one slide. So globally, I think Jackie has just shown us the data and information that's out there globally for all of us on women in leadership. And I'm sure in the last 2 days we've seen a lot of statistics on women in leadership as well. So just simply, we're pushing for MDG number 5, which is gender equality, and includes all of these gender pay gap, women's rights, sexual harassment issues, work segregation, and as she's mentioned, we make better leaders and better diagnostic people, leading to very good outcomes and universal health coverage. Next slide. However, despite all of this, we continue to be underrepresented. 70% women work, but 25% are in leadership. And for men, it's the opposite. It's 70% of men in leadership, but only 30% work. So even in the last World Assembly representation, we saw that in 2023 there was 32% representation by women, but then in the assembly this year there was only 30%, a drop of 2%. But we should not need to change to compete in systems and cultures designed for men. I agree with this picture that does say so. Next slide. So the way forward for us in the Pacific, we'd like to be led by women who will carry on our Pacific voices, and also have 4 action areas to support women's leadership and to build the foundation for equality. That would be through one, legally, where governments must create the legal foundation for gender equality to enable women to engage equally with men at work. Laws and policies that address underlying causes of gender inequity are needed, as the gender balance will not equalize on its own. Secondly is to address social norms and stereotypes. Thirdly is to address workplace systems and culture. And lastly is enabling environments, enabling women to achieve. So employers should put in place deliberate measures to enable women who are the majority in the health and social care workforce to apply for and achieve leadership positions equally and on merit. So with this and Pacific women, thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. That was a wonderful talk, and I think there is a lot to be learned here in terms of, how far we still have to go in representing women equally in the workforce at senior levels. And I'd really like to congratulate you on being such a trailblazer in the Pacific Islands and in pediatrics. I think we'll move now to questions. Sorry, this is the wrong question slide. Put it back. So if you could please submit any questions that you have via the chat box in the top right-hand corner. And if we could get Jackie and Elisa Pesci back online with your cameras on, we could open up for questions. I might start with a question for Dr. Small first. Sanjay Suri, one of our speakers from the second day of our conference, had a question for you. He was wondering if you had any insights into what the reasons for the underrepresentation of women in senior management roles might be.
Yes, thank you. I think it's a complex phenomenon, but what's very clear is that women spend a lot of extra time doing the unpaid caring work. And it's Sue may have a slide to show later on that really nicely represents that. And I think that's been a very significant barrier for women, and that one that's not been accommodated with our policies, systems, and nor in the responses to try and address that, which in some cases have actually added to the difficulties women experience. So we see, and many of my colleagues who are advancing through their career continue to experience the fallout and the consequences of taking time off to have children, even though they are moving into senior leadership roles. So that certainly is a very significant factor. I think the lack of role models, as I referred to, also remains a major problem. And the disadvantage that women may experience if they work part-time, and that can be counted against them in some areas such as research or leadership opportunities. But I think these are all things that we can change. I think being aware of them, discussing them, looking at what type of leadership we want, and ensuring that any policy change actually serves to lead to the outcomes we want, which is a much more equitable involvement of men and women in more senior leadership roles.
Can I pick up the question that Tanya's put in the question line? And actually, Tanya's raised this on previous occasions. She's really asking about the value add that women bring in leadership. I think what we've heard, particularly the SDG5 issue that Elissa Becky's raised, is a really important one. But Tanya's saying, yes, we need more women in leadership. What is it that what are they doing in that role that's so important? What niches are they filling? How do they add additional value? I know there's data on this, but I wonder if anybody wants to comment on that. It's a theme that's come up over the last couple of days.
I wonder if Elissa Pecky would like to make a comment, then I could perhaps follow her.
You just need to turn your microphone back on.
Yeah. Sorry, could you just repeat those questions again?
It's one of the questions. Some of the themes that have been coming through the questions over the last couple of days is about. There's no doubt we need more women in leadership. Absolutely. What are the special characteristics that women can bring that are going to add value to the health system?
Yeah, I guess there's quite a bit that's been written on this. The attitudes that women in leadership need to have. I guess we're looking at things like adaptability, emotional stability, strategic thinking. What else would there be? These are attributes that all women who've attained, very high leadership have. And as Jacqueline had just mentioned earlier, then there's the other bits that most women have over men, is that we're more caring. We're wired to care. Yeah, we're caring and a very what shall we say? We're people that that are realistic, and I think that would add value to women in leadership.
Kevin, I might just make a couple of extra comments. I agree, and I think some of the data that shows some differential patient outcomes probably picks up on the way women physicians, doctors interact with patients that may well be different to the way male physicians and doctors interact. But I think at the heart, what we have entering throughout and being trained as doctors are intelligent, capable women who are, in many cases, more than half of the workforce now. And without supporting their leadership, we lose the benefit of those well-trained, talented, intelligent, capable workforce along the way. So we actually lose that skill set from the leadership roles if we don't support women progressing through leadership. So I think at the heart, it's about ensuring we have the best. The best range of skills and not lose people. But I also think that we know that when the leadership roles better reflect the populations we serve, we're more likely to be able to meet the needs of the community. And women are about half the community. We know there's other intersectional diversity aspects that also need to be considered alongside gender diversity. But it's when you get the reflection of the community that you're going to get better leadership roles. I think there probably are different characteristics that women bring, and we may bring a diverse range of experiences that will help us better capitalise, consider the various contexts of the younger doctors who are now part of our health system.
Thank you. Sounds good.
I wonder, Kevin, if I could ask a question of Elisa. Is that possible?
Of course, yeah.
Really bold thing to do, I know.
And I think Sue makes a comment as well, so.
Yeah. Well, I'll just ask my question and then you can go to Sue. But I'm just really interested in the global movement, and I'm wondering how common or how different women leader experiences is across different countries. I spoke from my personal experience, but I just wonder whether Elisa might comment on the diversity of experiences. Particularly, I think she's part of the World Women in Global Health initiative. So I'd just like to hear about the diversity of experiences of women leaders.
That was for Ellie, right?
Oh, I thought that was for you. Okay. The diversity of women leaders in the regional place. Well, it's diverse. Yeah, we've got lots of experts in health in WIPRO. We're looking at very highly intelligent women. They've taken highest places in microbiology, in all technological adversities. They're all across the globe, and I feel like small fish when I'm with them because they've been through disasters, they've been in the outbreaks in various countries, they've experienced worse scenarios, they've even experienced best scenarios. We see leaders in all aspects of health. So yeah, it's diverse, but the great thing is that the majority of women can communicate. And most of them are very good at communicating, and we can communicate at any level, and their experiences are the same. I wouldn't say that their experiences in leadership, up the ladder up all the way up to the World Health Assembly and down to us is any different. I think they go through the same experiences that even women in the Pacific are exposed to.
Wonderful. And I guess to follow on from that, one final question for you both. You both talked about the importance of taking opportunities that were presented to you and, making the most of doors as they opened. There is a question that asked if you'd made a plan to pursue particular leadership opportunities from the start of your career, and did you go for any opportunity that arose, or did you kind of pick and choose the ones that you felt would be most effective and would lead you to where you were hoping to end up?
So I might kick off. I might say that I still struggle to consider myself a leader, and I certainly didn't earlier in my career when I was accepting opportunities that came my way. What drove me literally was to make a difference. to use my time to complement my paid work as a clinician, flexibility around my children. And some of those opportunities really bore a lot of fruit along the way. But it was really to take opportunities that came my way, say yes, and really just try and make a difference was really my driving force. And really it wasn't until, as far as the president of the college, until a few months before I stood for election that I actually decided to stand. Prior to that, I'd not even considered it. So the doors can open at any stage of your career, which I think is an exciting prospect. And I do have to thank my head of department for her support through this period as well. That's crucial to have. If you have women leaders, they're going to support other women leaders, and I certainly have one of those.
Yeah, I guess I'm the same. I never dreamt that I would be a leader until now, even when I'm discussing with my team, even with the people that I work with, I still don't look at myself as a leader. It's always in discussions, in collaborations, in communication with my team, and it's always, asking, learning, adapting. It's never about being on top, and I I hope to have more women like us who will take the mantle when we leave. We're not going to be here forever, but at the same time, I'm very happy to mentor and lead others because we were made to and led that way. As Jackie said, we had very good mentors. We had very good mentors. We had supportive workers. We've got the supportive teams, and most of all, for me, it's been a supportive family, supportive husbands, supportive partners, and supportive children. Because we travel a lot. We go to lots of meetings. We stay up late, and there's that support from home and in our communities. So that's for me what is the most important driving factor that keeps me going. And I hope that we'll get to see more people like that, yeah, and more supportive communities. Yeah. Thanks.
Oh, those are good points, Ellie. Just talking about the sort of global leadership, which has come up a couple of times. As we know, the majority of pediatricians are women, but if we look at the senior global leaders in pediatrics, it's nearly all men. And I think Illy, your slide of saying, only 25% of senior health leaders are women, this is telling. And it means, as Jackie's saying, we miss out on so much value that the women bring, their perspective, so important for us. So we do have a particular problem in pediatrics, in my view. I think we need to see change. And I think Sue has touched on that about fixing systems, not women. And I think the next session we're probably going to dig into that a bit more. But um, we have a situation globally where we do need to do something. We actually need to find ways to empower women in pediatrics to step into leadership roles. And I think without an active plan and strategy, we'll just keep perpetuating the system we've got. So I think these are issues that will be talked about a bit. Sue, you might want to make some comment on that. I don't want to
Oh,
hijack the
I
discussion.
yeah, I was just going to say Vanaka Ili, Vanaka Vakalevu, that was fantastic. And I have the privilege of Ili being my boss when I work with her in Fiji and now in the PPA. And thanks to Jackie, who I've watched be juggling being a president while being an active clinician in my team. And I think both of them have illustrated how my particular hate around the word soft skills. I think soft skills is a very gendered statement. I think it demeans the skills of women. Soft skills are actually essential skills for communication and effective leadership. But I wanted to ask Ilya and Jackie, completely out of self-interest, I completely agree, you've got to fix the system, not women. We're not the problem. what would be one thing you would do, like if you were given all the power in the world or headed up, the IPA or whatever, what would be the one thing you would do to make it easier for women to not change who they are and change they want the desire to be with their kids, be with their husbands, look after their family? What's one thing you would do to change them, to help them be senior leaders? It's a big question. Just wild idea. Any? I'm going to go to Illy first.
Jackie, you first.
I'll make a comment. It's a bit like wishing for another wish. You keep wanting to go further. So I'd have to say that I think there is so much policy change and systems change that's needed. What I would like to see is a requirement that all new health policies actually have a measure against gender equity built into them. So wherever you look, whatever part of the health system, whatever stage of career, you can expect that any new health policy, any existing health policy that's being reviewed, is reviewed from its impact on gender equity. Because I think women become leaders throughout their career. There are some remarkable trainees who are leaders. There's one here. And so you don't have to be late in your career to be a leader. But I would have a requirement that all health system policies, all training policies, all college policies are measured against gender equity.
Thanks, Jackie. Illy?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with her. Yeah, I just mentioned the 4 things that would probably be the way forward. And on top of that was legal. So it'll be policies and governance to change so that, just in social norms and stereotypes, workplace systems, and that has been ongoing forever, and it hasn't really done much change. So I would have to go on legal things on policies and governance. Yes.
Thanks, Illy. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Sue, for a wonderful question and a very challenging question. I think we all started racking our brains with that. It's hard to think of one thing that we could possibly do to change the system. I would like to thank Dr. Small and Dr. Veretti again for being online with us tonight and for their amazing talks and all their insights. You are both doing an incredible job, and I am feeling very lucky to be in the same room as you tonight. So I think we will put this session on hold here. We'll go to our break, and I hope you can all be back very soon. Kevin, what time? How long do they have?
Just under an hour. So
Just under an hour.
about 55 minutes, and then we'll reconvene for the last session.
Wonderful. Everyone, please be back here in 55 minutes for the last session, where Sue, along with Dr. Kingdon and Dr. Canaris, will take us through some ideas on how we can change the system and reimagine leadership. Thank you.
And thanks, just to add to Alicia's comments, thanks so much to Jackie and Illy for terrific presentations. You're wonderful role models, and congratulations on your journey and the way you've presented. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Alicia, do we leave and then rejoin?
Well, welcome back, everybody. Wasn't the last session just fantastic, and it was really good to hear the different perspectives from Jackie with her leadership journey and the data she presented, and then Lily's perspective with the Pacific and her leadership there and her discussion about the critical elements that women bring to leadership. And I found that really helpful. I also thought that her reference to SDG 5 was useful. The SDGs are an important measure, and SDG 5's there about gender equity and things. So I think that's something we could weave in as we move forward. So I'm grateful that she reminded us of that. Um, so I'll just explain how this session's going to run. This is the final session of our leadership conference. So what we're going to do is to have 3 reasonably brief presentations, I think, and then some questions put, and then basically open discussion. And Alicia and I don't want to sort of interfere in the process too much. So what I'm going to do is introduce our 3 speakers now, and then they will just follow each other, and then we'll have this open discussion and just see where we land. This is the closing session, so we want to try and think, what have we discussed? Where are we going with this? Is this just a talk fest, or can we actually start to bring in some real change? And even if it's stepwise, but something needs to be done, I think that's clear. So let me introduce our 3 speakers. And firstly, just thanks to Alicia, who's my co-chair, and she's been such an important driver in this whole process. And Richard is at the back end with IT support, and Vicky's helping enormously too. So, but firstly, let me introduce Kostas, so Konstantinos Kanara. So Kostas is a pediatric intensive care unit consultant in Cambridge in the UK. He's Associate Professor of Medical Ethics at the University of Nicosia. So welcome, Kostas. Good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Camilla Kingdon. Camilla gave the initial plenary on our first day, which was absolutely inspiring. I have to say I find Camilla such an inspiring leader, and I really enjoy working with her. She's the immediate past president of the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health in the UK. So that's a very senior role. She's a neonatologist, and she works at the Evelina Children's Hospital, which is the second children's hospital in London. And then Sue Wolfenden, who I've known for a long time. So Sue is Professor of Community Paediatrics at the University of Sydney. She's Director of Community Paediatrics for the Sydney Local Health District, and she's co-chair of the Sydney Institute for Women, Children and Their Families. So a stellar lineup, and over to you, Kostas. I think you're beginning. Thank you.
Great, got the slides up. Thanks, Alicia, Kevin, Richard, and Vicky for having me on this lovely course today. Spot the imposter next to Camilla and Sue, but I'll try to do my invitation justice. So today I'm going to talk to you about the value of flat hierarchy in modern day clinical leadership. First, I'd like to start by giving you all a moment to consider situations where you have witnessed clinical concerns being dismissed on the wards because they originated from someone who was, and I hate this term, just a trainee or just a nurse. And I'd like you to think whether ignoring the set concerns amounted to a missed opportunity to treat a patient early, or worse still, ended in the patient being harmed. Now, apart from introducing incivility and tribalism at the workplace, using the terms just this or just that is an example of how the lack of flat hierarchy in healthcare amounts to ineffective leadership that can translate into serious patient safety failures. Now, what does flat hierarchy mean? Flat hierarchy is not a new concept in clinical literature. The traditional structure in healthcare organizations such as the NHS, where Camilla and I work in, is quite pyramidal. Their setup is quite rigid usually, with clearly demarcated chains of command from what are perceived wrongly to be the lowest ranking workers to those perceived to be the managers located in the ivory towers of any organization within the NHS. By contrast, in a flat hierarchy model, there is minimal middle management between the shop floor personnel, so the people that do the meat of the clinical work, and the decision-making executives. So the number of people directly supervised by higher management might still be large, but the number of people in that chain of command is usually much smaller. The benefit of that is that it makes the lines of communication between the office-based leaders and the frontline workforce much shorter, and as a result, the teams operating within that structure can be much more responsive to change and to feedback. Now, most of us are of pediatric background in this course, so very few of you will disagree that in pediatrics, in our line of work, it's intuitively right that decisions relating to the management and the care of patients should be influenced primarily by those at the front line, those that are closest to the bedside or the cot. The flat hierarchy model is a collaborative one in nature. So because of that, it empowers staff to raise patient safety concerns. It enhances the feeling of belonging to a team that has similar goals and is patient orientated. The positive culture of psychological safety is one that allows anyone within the team to raise concerns directly to even the most experienced member of that team. And it addresses three main threats to patient safety. Number one, it allows for better, more transparent communication. Number two, it gives a powerful message that we act as a unit and as a team to do what's best for our patients, which is why we went into healthcare, hopefully, in the first place. And number three, it enables everyone to be much more approachable, regardless of the job role. The collective effect is to improve transparency, morale, staff retention, feeling valued, but it also minimizes tribalism at the workplace. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. Now, flatter hierarchical structures nurture self-actualization in staff. But what is self-actualization? What's it defined as? It's basically the realization or the fulfillment of someone's talents and someone's potential, which then brings us to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is on the screen behind you. This is a simplified version, obviously, for the benefit of this talk. Now, Maslow places self-actualization at the very top of the hierarchy of needs. Every single one of us, all healthcare workers, ultimately want to feel that they're doing the best they can in their position. This motivates us to continue on our career paths and to succeed and do the best for our patients. A self-actualized employee feels trusted, valued, empowered, and this is what encourages growth and engagement. Beneficiaries are not just the employees, but the patients. Anything that hinders that self-actualization harms both the employee and the patient. A steep hierarchy, self-evidently, is a significant hindrance to that. Now, there are numerous examples of headline cases, some leading to public inquiry, some not, in the UK, that highlight failures in leadership coming directly from an overly rigid hierarchical structure, which is a setup that fuels a disconnect between managers and the frontline staff. In the last couple of years alone, and these are just examples relating to pediatrics, we had the Lucy Letby case in the UK, as well as the Martha Mills case. At the receiving end of those failures were patients that died as a result. In both cases, despite taking place hundreds of miles apart from one another, they had one theme in common, a profoundly hierarchical structure that largely ignored patient safety concerns that arose from those not in leadership positions. I'll start with the Letby case. Now, this was an aberration and thankfully an outlier. A neonatal nurse, for those that are not UK based, was found guilty of murdering 7 infants in a NICU and attempted the murder of at least 6 others between June 2015 and June 2016. No less than 5 neonatal consultants repeatedly raised the alarm and highlighted their concerns about Letby with higher management. Now, despite managers having no expertise in neonatal medicine, they dismissed these concerns on repeat. They allowed Letby to carry on working on their unit, and they put barriers in any further concerns being raised about the matter by the neonatal team. This is a prime example of how a disconnect between high management and the perceived worker bees can lead to real patient harm. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. In truth, very few cases of management failure are as dramatic or indeed as criminal as the Letby case, which brings us to the story of Martha Mills, which is sadly much more common. Her story was first published in The Guardian and was written by Martha's mother, a journalist. She spoke of the agony the family went through when doctors in training and nurses were too afraid to challenge a consultant named as the Be-Bow-Tied Professor, on a clinical decision he had made in relation to Martha, a 13-year-old daughter. The result was a delay in the diagnosis of sepsis and appropriate escalation of management, contributing to Martha's death. This story is tragic and powerful in equal measure. And whilst rigid hierarchical structures rarely have such cataclysmic results, healthcare is full of such stories that have not been told. Every single one of these stories matter, and many of those would have had much better outcomes if leaders put structures in place that enabled them to listen to staff better, but also if staff advocated for their parents louder and without fear of impunity. Sadly, within the UK at least, the health service does not have a good track record of how organisations treat whistleblowers and those that loudly raise patient safety concerns. In fact, and this is the kick, instead of actively listening and implementing change, the overall culture, as highlighted by the cases I just mentioned, is one of hierarchical rank closure and, worse still, punitive action against the very people that flag up these concerns. There is, of course, strong evidence to support that a culture of a flatter hierarchy in healthcare organizations is better for patient safety, and it also leads to lower patient mortality rates, higher patient satisfaction rates, and by extension, better staff retention. And this has been proven by numerous meta-analyses. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, as a consultant, as a senior clinician, there is often the notion that I know everything related to my specialty. This is a misconception, and it hinders the principles of flat hierarchy and cross-specialty care. Pediatrics and medicine in general is ever evolving, and the moment we believe our own hype that we're all knowing is the moment that we stop learning as healthcare providers, and the moment we start declining, both as clinicians and as leaders. Admitting that we do not know something can be misconstrued as a vulnerability, but I can assure you 100% that it is a strength. The safest clinicians are the ones that are honest about the limitations and the ones that do not see themselves better than others. When leading the ward rounds or when giving clinical advice over the phone, like I was doing overnight, I'll make sure that I invite questions on my clinical plan. I'm secure enough in my own knowledge and in my training that any questions that follow is not an insult to my clinical capabilities, but rather an opportunity for others to either learn from me or to advocate for the patient by putting their ideas across. What I say should not be construed as dogma, and by inviting people to ask questions ensures that everyone has a clear idea of the collective plan, but also serves to identify any of my own blind spots and biases. This collaborative approach has served me, my team, and more importantly, my patients well over the years. By allowing myself to be openly questioned, it has helped me to avoid clinical errors on more than one occasion, proving that beneficiaries of this approach are not just the patients, but clinicians themselves. So I want to leave you with this. So if you're in the audience and you're in position of leadership, be the change your staff and your patients need you to be. Be the lighthouse for all those that work with you. Become available, become approachable, and set the tone. If you're not in a leadership position yet, you need to advocate for your patients louder, be fearless when doing so, and support those around you. Be the colleague that you yourself would like to work with. Do it for yourselves, do it for each other, and do it for your patients. Thank you.
Thank you, Kostas. That was. You're going to think that Kostas and I collaborated over our little talks, but I can assure you we didn't. And I hope I'm going to pick up a couple of the themes that Kostas has alluded to in that incredibly insightful and really useful talk. Thank you, Kostas. I was asked to kind of reflect on my leadership journey, and I always think of a journey. I love planning family holidays, and I organize them down to the nth degree. So in that respect, a journey sounds like it's meant to be very organized and planned. But of course, the kind of journey that we're talking about, and certainly a kind of leadership journey, is is anything but. And certainly my leadership journey has had many twists and turns and been very heavily influenced by luck and by chance. And so I thought I would share with you two precious lessons that I've learned that I guess I've only really coalesced in my mind as my precious lessons, literally in the last year or so. And so I thought I would, this has been quite a useful exercise personally to kind of distill some of my thinking about this. So next slide, please. So my first leadership lesson is based on this African proverb, which I know as pediatricians, many of you will be aware of, namely this notion that it takes a whole village to raise a child. And of course, what we mean in the context of children is that children tend to flourish when they're in an environment where there are all sorts of different people, you know, parents, grandparents, the lady in the newspaper shop around the corner, you know, all of these people coming together to kind of enrich the child's life and development. And I think the exact same is true for leaders. You need to have a village around you. We need this collective effort of a number of different people in our lives to kind of support our leadership journey. And as a woman, I would say women, I think, probably need this more than any. What I'm talking about isn't a group of kind of sycophantic people who are going to tell you how wonderful you are. That's not what I mean. These may be critical friends. They're often the sorts of people that are pointing out your blind spots. But it's really important to get a diverse group of people around you to help and support you. And I've personally benefited massively from the people in my village. And when I stop to think about who they are, actually, I've got a group of fantastic trainees. They're not a group; they are individuals that I work with and interact with, who will frequently WhatsApp me either with a little bit of nugget or observation that they've seen from the clinical front line that they feel that it's important to share with me because it's a really kind of key insight, or just something along the lines of, you know, thank you so much for your most recent blog. It really touched a chord with me. That kind of feedback is just really precious, really important. And I have benefited so much from, so particularly these are younger colleagues who have been supportive and kind and really helped me along my journey in both my Royal College President role, but actually in previous leadership roles as well. And actually I can remember one or two of them taking me aside and saying, you know, I've got some insights that I want to share with you. You know, particularly when I was struggling to kind of balance my clinical work with some work that I was doing as head of school for pediatrics in London. I can remember a trainee saying to me, "I wonder if you need to think about cutting back a bit more on your clinical work. You know, you seem too stretched." And you know, I can still remember that conversation, and it was a fabulous insight that did lead me to make some changes in the way I was constructing my working life. There are other people though as well who just stop on in the corridor, that kind of really in the moment, compassionate kind of observation and feedback. These are really, really important relationships, and I have benefited so much from those people in my life. I actually also have some absolutely brilliant nursing colleagues, and this is going to sound a little bit trivial, but bear with me. I've got one nursing colleague who I've known for the last 25 years, and she's kind of amongst many other attributes, she's my style guru. So I'll regularly get a WhatsApp from her, and she'll go, "Have you seen? There's an amazing sale on at Karen Millen, and there's a dress there that I think would be absolutely perfect for that black tie-do you've got to go to next week." And you know, that sounds trivial, but actually when you're really busy and you're spinning loads of plates, I can't tell you the number of times she saved my bacon because I've managed to kind of opportunistically find something that I just needed to buy for the next kind of formal Royal College event. So, you know, think about the people in your village, and some of them will be unconventional in the way in which they support you. I mean, my two daughters, for instance, have just been solid and fantastic. My husband's been brilliant. So you want this kind of diverse group of people in your village supporting you in lots and lots of different ways. And I think it's really transformed how I've performed as a leader. It's helped me to be braver. It's helped me distill what my priorities are, because I've had that kind of constant and live feedback and conversation with this wonderful, rich group of people around me. So that's my first lesson: is have a village. I can have the next slide, please. And then my second lesson relates to this knotty issue of perfectionism. So I'm a neonatologist. I'm a real details person. In the beginning of my kind of leadership experience, I would hugely prepare for every single event. I'm a real details person. But the problem with perfectionism is that perfectionism tells us that mistakes or failure are actually personal defects. And so what that drives you to do is then try and avoid any potential situation or circumstance where you may be seen as not being 110% prepared and all over the detail. And so I think perfectionism is a real risk for people in leadership positions. It tends to kill curiosity, because perfectionism is all about being completely au fait with every aspect of the detail. So can I have the next slide, please? This is my youngest daughter. Now, she's 21 now, and she's one of these young women who has an answer to absolutely every problem in life, and a very glib response to any kind of thorny issue. So this is Izzy, and I'll have the next slide, please. And usually I'm batting her off and telling her to stop telling me about the latest thing she's seen on Instagram or the latest influencer. But she relentlessly says to me, "Mum, don't sweat the small stuff." And the first few times she said it, I kind of thought, oh, it's just another one of Izzy's kind of isms. But actually, I started thinking about it, and I realized that there is more than a grain of truth in this idea of not sweating the small stuff. Because constant, obsessive, meticulous attention to detail and this kind of pursuit of perfectionism, I think really comes with a price. And apart from anything else, it's really exhausting. And I think it pushes us into positions where we are at risk of not seeing the bigger picture because we're so focused on the detail. And so I think it's really important that we critically ask ourselves the question, are we being too perfectionist? Brené Brown, who I am a great follower of and is a fantastic woman when it comes to kind of pulling words together to really make sense. She says perfectionism is not self-improvement. Understanding the difference between healthy striving and perfectionism is critical to laying down the shield and picking up your life, and that perfectionism hampers success. So if I could have the next slide, please. This issue with perfectionism has led me to think much, much more about curiosity, because I think curiosity is the antithesis of perfectionism. It's different to interest. Interest is that just being cognitively open to new ideas. Curiosity takes it one step further. And the thing about curiosity is that it's underpinned with uncertainty. And that's why us perfectionists find curiosity really difficult. But I think, as I've said, this is extremely important, because unless we are curious, we don't ask questions. If we're not happy to be curious, and to Costas's point, we are terrified of not looking like the expert and being able to have the kind of final say on everything. We're not prepared to be wrong. And the result is that we either don't engage with some of these thorny or difficult issues, or we become the kind of leader that is not capable of hearing feedback, of listening to the people in our wider team, being receptive to new ways of thinking, and being curious about the world in which we live. So my last slide, please, before I hand over to Sue. I just wanted to just very, very briefly, these are two topics that I dealt with in quite a lot of detail when I was president of the Royal College of Pediatrics and Child Health. The first was our work around equality, diversity and inclusion, where we started off very, very much focused on race, but then moved into disability and gender issues as well. Equality, diversity, inclusion can take you to some very difficult conversations, to some very difficult places. And the only way I found I could cope with it was by acknowledging that I was going to make mistakes, that I might even offend people in my earnest attempt to embrace the topic, but that I had to learn to become comfortable with it. And one of my strategies for dealing with it, because I was really nervous about the work we were doing around equality, diversity, and inclusion, as much as I was totally committed to doing it. The way I helped myself was by asking for some really important colleagues of mine who I knew had real expertise in these topics to become my critical friends. And we ended up having a series of really important conversations over the 3 years where hopefully they felt they could say to me, listen, I think you've got this wrong. You need to look at this differently. At one point we were very focused on race issues. And I can remember a really fabulous friend and colleague of mine who was leading on LGBTQ issues saying, Camilla, you're blindsided to all the other issues around equality and diversity. I know why you're focused on race, but as a college, we've got to think more broadly. And so that led to a really important discussion about how we learn to embrace the wider issues around inclusion. So I think EDI, is something that I know worries people, but, I don't think it's a negotiable part of leading. But, be curious and get that group of critical friends around you to help you on your journey. And the same is true for health inequalities. As college president, I felt we're dealing with so many issues around the social determinants of health, particularly in the UK. And actually, this is a global issue, isn't it? Whether it's climate change, whether it's poverty. In this country, we are seeing all our child health outcomes heading in the wrong direction, particularly for our children in the most deprived communities. We have a moral obligation to speak up about this. But my sort of previous self would have been wanting to be all over the detail and become an expert on the topic before I was prepared to speak about it. There isn't time for that. You've got to learn to trust the people around you, be curious, deal with uncertainty. And so I found I really had to shift the way I thought about these issues in order for me to try and become more active and outspoken around child health inequalities. So my two leadership lessons that I wanted to share with you all before I hand over to Sue is develop your village, which is find your allies, who are your friends, who are you going to have your go-to people, and make it as diverse a group as possible. And secondly, embrace uncertainty and don't sweat the small stuff. So thank you, and over to you, Sue.
Thanks, Camilla. While Alicia's getting my slides, thanks, Alicia. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on whose land we're meeting today, where I am, which is on Darug and Gurungai land of the Great Eora Nation. Just next slide, thanks, Alicia. My name's Sue Wolverton, saying good for my team. I think if you just click again, Alicia, the animation will work. This is just an illustration of my leadership journey. Click it again, click it a couple of times. And I guess what it's pointing out is that, like everyone, and Illy talked about this, Camilla's talked about this, Jackie talked about it, it's not long. It's, someone said, did you plan it? No, most definitely did not plan it. It took a long time. It was not strategic. It took a lot of working out what my vision was and what got me going. and what my values were beyond work. And overall, I'd say it took me 22 years to go from becoming a pediatrician to becoming a senior leader. There was a lot of faffing around before I even had my kids of working out what I wanted to do, including traveling. And I think that's really important. So my first tip is, I know we're all obsessed about leadership, and I think women in leadership is really important. We as doctors are very perfectionistic. We are very driven as a group. There is nothing wrong with you having a bit of time out doing different things to work out who you are. So that is regardless of your gender. But I think I just want you to look at the shape. I kind of put my kids in as sort of two not particularly attractive baby blobs, but it kind of shows what women's work or women load or, carer load does to productivity for a clinical academic. Really, that first half of my career was me juggling being a mum, which was really important to me, and a pediatrician. I earned more than my husband. He's a teacher, which is fantastic for school holidays. So I also had an economic thing. So really that first bit of being that clinician academic was really focusing on learning my skills. And you can see as soon as the kids hit school, in addition to me going, gosh, I don't know how I did that, you can see my productivity as an academic started to take off. So those things are citations you're seeing there. And then my third child was my PhD. So I didn't actually start my PhD until I was quite old. I did it part-time while my daughter was and my kids were at school on their 2 days off. And then really, I've only been essentially full-time since about 2019, and you can really see how things take off. And I do believe our current models are demanding women need to be full-time with minimal other responsibilities. I really didn't feel that those models even applied to me until the children were well and truly finishing school. And I think that's an interesting conversation to have. Next slide, please, Alicia. Thanks. I absolutely agree. You need your support team. Your support team's fundamental. They're part of your history. I've been so lucky to be surrounded by people that I respect. So, I've got, it starts off with mum and dad. My mum was in the second group of the Peace Corps. That was quite phenomenal for me to see her. She was a midwife. My dad was an engineer. I had parents who didn't want me to do medicine. We didn't have anyone who was a doctor in the family. That was both an advantage and a disadvantage. I didn't really have the legacy of academia or medicine, but equally I didn't have any of the barriers or assumptions that might bring. Those from Australia might notice the wonderful Fiona Stanley. Being a West Australian, I had the advantage that Fiona Stanley, who became the Australian of the Year, really mentored me from about 17 onwards. And then I've got Christine Jeffrey-Stokes, who's just got an Order of Australia, works in the goldfields of Western Australia. That's her husband, Jeffrey Stokes, leading in Indigenous health. And Craig Mellis, Victor Nosser, and Katrina Williams, and Nadia Badawi, a great neonatologist in Sydney. And what I want to say about all these people here, excluding mum and dad, all of these people here, they are not your classic leaders. They are all people who have strong interests outside of work. They are all people who are passionate about their vision and have minimal ego. They're all people who would drop any time in a very busy life to give you advice and to look after you. They all epitomise compassionate leadership that Camilla was talking about before. Next slide, please. And they're all friends, which is a wonderful thing about your mentors. I think the other thing we all need to be starting to think about, I'm really aware of now, I'm in the last bit of my career, in the last 15 years, is my legacy. And I've never thought about my feminist legacy before. I don't think I even really, I don't think I even considered feminism. I assumed I got to do everything everyone else got to do. I did notice when I had the kids, I realised that that wasn't the case. Things changed. And now I'm out of that again. I'm suddenly going, what I do now is actually role modelling for the future female leaders. And so I really just want to pay homage to them, because a bit like your trainees, Camilla, and that flat hierarchy, Constantine, what we've got on the left, Laurel Mimo and Katerina Ostajic, and the wonderful Kalera, who I work with Dr. Ili in Fiji, and they are all brilliant future, way smarter academic clinicians, leaders who are doing amazing stuff around equity and co-design with young people, improving health systems. And then what we've got on the right are my teams that I've had the privilege of working with. And I cannot agree more on the fact that you need that flat hierarchy, and you need people to fearlessly be able to give you advice. And I do think female leaders are good at doing that. I think that's one of our real superpowers, is our ability to use a distributive leadership style as well, and to have fun with your team. So I'm really aware of what I'm modelling as a leader for people, so that it also doesn't seem unobtainable, which is how it felt for me, to be honest, for many years. Next slide. Thanks, Alicia. Yeah, so the things I've learned, I think a lot of people have been saying this. I think it is important for you to develop your mission statement and vision, and then be prepared to adapt it. Mine initially, I think when I was 17, was to save the world. I don't think it's actually changed that much. I think most people in medicine have a bit of that, but I think it's refined to make sure that children all get a fair go in Australian terminology, and that we reduce health inequities, and that our health services are certainly not contributing to those inequities. And that is absolutely comes from my own background, the background of my father, who was in out-of-home care. I'm aware of the privilege that I have. It comes from being a white middle-class privileged woman in a country where people who are not that have far worse outcomes. And being on land that was never ceded to white people. We're on Aboriginal land in Australia. Another really great tip someone gave me, I can't remember, but don't make other people's goals your own. Work out what you want in life and be flexible around it. Obviously, things change. That's okay. Don't keep looking at everyone else and going, I should be like that. It's a bit like the perfectionism Camilla talks about. The ambivalence is what will do your head in terms of your leadership journey. Work out what your goals are. They will, maybe in 5 years squats, that's fine, and be unapologetic for it, because that's the only way change is going to happen. Again, there's no right way, and you may change your mind, which goes along with the perfectionism. Really, really, really important to have senior leadership mentors who fit with your values. Find people that you look at and go, oh, they're cool. I'd love to be like that. Or the kind of person who, when you go and do a presentation, you go, right, I need to be Fiona, or I need to be Chris, as I would say. Camilla, I'm going to say networking versus luck. I don't know about luck. I think sometimes I do feel that I've been very lucky with the people I've found, but I also think networking brings its own luck. And so we've got to think about, I think a lot of women don't get the opportunity to network because they're too busy going to work, running to daycare, picking up kids from school. They don't necessarily get those opportunities. And I do think we need to think about how we make more luck for women in terms of things. But I have certainly been very lucky. I do think it's okay to have a career, family, friends, and other interests in your life, and they're all important, and you need to be clear on boundaries and carve out time. There has been a bit of language where we've said, yeah, you can't do it all at one time, and now I'm going to challenge that. So next slide, please, because I think we should. Thanks. Yeah. So I think we have to be honest. I think women often, slide back, Alicia. I think women often feel that the luck that they have, we've lost the middle slide. It's gone. That's right. Let's do this one. Good. However, I am a well-resourced, privileged white woman, and it still took me 22 to 24 years to actually become a senior leader in a family-friendly workplace, because pediatrics is the most family-friendly specialty that we know. 88% of our trainees are women. I had lots of junior and mid-career leadership opportunities, because in pediatrics, we've been job sharing since the 1990s in Australia. But I have to say, and no one ever told me I couldn't be a senior leader, but I honestly, hand on heart, can say that I couldn't find any models of senior leadership that I could even consider that would work with being part-time or doing other things that are important to me, hence the late thing. And I have watched, and I'm sure we all have, excellent male and female senior leaders get burnt out, sick, moved on, and I just don't want that to happen to any of my colleagues. And I will say again, Kevin, the problem isn't me, or it's not women in leadership, it's our leadership models. There's nothing wrong with us as women. It's the current system, as Illy said, is not, it's an old model. It's a patriarchal model, I would argue. Next slide. And whiz through so we can do our Slido. Okay, So I think this is just all I want you to do is look at the diagram. I think it typifies the difference in a leadership journey for women versus men. You've got the bloke going up, he's got his coffee, he's just doing each ladder. It's all very clear, it's all very strategic, it's all following on. You've got the woman juggling everything, plus she's doing all the mental load of organising the household usually, and often organising a lot of things for her team and her broader executive, and just there is a lot more women's work and load. We have greater barriers. I think we've talked about this in terms of it isn't a meritocracy, because meritocracy assumes you've got the same opportunities from the very beginning. And unless we acknowledge the women's load or the carers' load, that's just not going to work. Next slide, please. I think it's my last slide. Yes, it is, because it's got an animation. I don't know if I need to add much onto this, because I think Jackie talked to this, but there is quite a lot of evidence around what you need to do to increase female leadership. There's a brilliant meta-analysis, a systematic review done by a group in Monash, and they've got about 20 recommendations in all sorts of areas. So it's not like this is under-researched. And essentially, some of the key strategies are policies for better work-life integration. You can't pretend that it doesn't exist. More tangible support for maternity leave and child rearing, financial aid and flexible parenting-friendly working hours. And I think a lot of us get that in our early middle years. Career pathways that dovetail with parenting. I'm just going to part-time leadership roles. This is from their Workplace Gender Equity Agency, which I didn't even know about in the Australian government, and they have shown that in business models, working part-time as having female leaders is actually really good for business. You make less mistakes, it's less risky, and there are some part-time issues. And again, it's all the stuff Ellie was talking about, strong case for change, getting a commitment, actively sponsoring women, that whole thing about getting governance in, being accountable, not pretending there aren't life transitions that are fundamental to leadership journeys, and ensuring you've got your infrastructure and investing it. Final, keep going. Next slide. I think it's my final slide. Next. Okay, so I'm just going to put this out before we get the Slidos. Can we do leadership differently? Who says women who want to work part-time can't be senior leaders? I'm just doing a whole lot of who says. Why not? Who says that being a good senior leader, you must only focus on and prioritise work above all else? Who says that working 60 hours a week, working week is desirable or even sane? And how does that fit with the fact that we also talk about leaderships needing to be able to look after themselves and be self-regulated? So if you can't currently follow the current senior leadership models that most of us see, you don't have time for family, friends, communities, exercise, spirituality, self-reflection, or anything, and you will make mistakes as Constantinos works. So it's not sustainable. I think there's an animation, Alicia, and then we're done. Let's click again. And so I'm arguing we need to move from being the hamsters, which I think many people in senior leadership feel like. You're the hamster on the wheel, you're never on top, versus the hierarchical leadership that's on your left and the distributive leadership that's on our right. Women suit distributive leadership. My model of leadership in my team, and the only reason I can function is I have a deputy director and I have excellent a leadership team underneath me, of which Jackie is one. And we're always, and they're very much feed up, and we all talk as a collaborative hierarchy. So I just really want to challenge people and say, I don't think our current leadership models are sustainable. I don't think they're the way things have to be. And I think it's up to us to start thinking about new models and really advocating for change. It's not enough to have women in leadership. Until we change our fundamental model, that's not going to happen, I don't think. And I think that's my last slide. I think I'm done. Thanks. So I think we now have a Slido, and I don't know whether Costas and Camilla, we want to just each take a question. I have the questions here on a email somewhere. Our questions that we had, our first question was reflecting on your leadership. I might do the first one maybe, and I'll just pop them in the chat. Perhaps reflecting on our leadership. Yes?
Yep.
So our first, what do you think?
Works for me.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's
okay.
Good. Go for it too. Yeah.
I'm putting it in the chat now. Here we go. So our first leadership question was, reflecting on your leadership experience, what do you enjoy about being a leader? So I think we were going to try and do this as a Slido, and Richard's running that, and that's our Slido code. So if everyone could just pop that in, that'd be great.
Yeah, you can take a picture of that graphic, and then if it comes up on your phone, you can put your answer in. So that's good.
Oh, there you go. Thank you, Richard. So we've got helping, influencing positive change and supporting my team, the development and growth, caring on a broader scale. That really leads into compassionate leadership, being part of someone else's support village. Change and mentor the next generation.
Can I just say, that person that said the thing about being in somebody else's support village, I think that's so important.
That's good.
Because we talk about leadership as if somebody is a leader and other, but you might be a leader in one context, but part of a team in another, and we all seamlessly interchange, don't we, in our roles?
Yeah.
And so acknowledging that you have just as big a responsibility to support somebody else in a leadership position as a leader, I think, is incredibly important. I love that.
Yeah. Inclusivity and the positivity, the service-oriented benefit. I love the raising awareness about self-care and healthing. It's a very generous, kind of theme coming through about people getting a real sense of fulfillment and value from their leadership. And I think that is why people do it. That's why we all do it, isn't it? It's just that sense of value in providing excellent care. And learning. Yeah, I had one of my bosses that I showed a picture of. He said, if you're not learning, you're in the wrong role. You need to be uncomfortable. Great. Right.
Obstacles.
Costas, do you want to talk to the second one?
I mean, where do I begin? This is a hard one, actually. I mean, so and it's become worse over the last 10 years. I've encountered increasing racism, unfortunately, in the NHS since Brexit, especially. It's not just the NHS; it's the country. And I mean, I'm not born in the UK. I'm from Cyprus. I came here to study 25 years ago. Fell in love with another pediatrician in university who's born and bred in Manchester, and we stayed and had kids, and that's it. So I'm not a local, but I have found the fact that I'm not UK born a hindrance, even though I'm, white and a male, and therefore have lots of other privileges as a result of it. And that, and since Brexit, there have been derogatory terms thrown to my face, even as a white male, which makes me question how much worse those who are not white and male have it as a result in this country. And I despair as a result, because I have two girls, and what sort of world we're leaving behind. This is not just specific to leadership. I have found it on my path to leadership. But we chatted briefly earlier with Camilla, we're hoping for a change in direction systemically with the in the next few weeks. I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to politicize.
Yeah, I think it's different, but I think it really looks like being flexible when depending on a very structured, sometimes overly rigid approach. There's a lot of imposter syndrome here. Which I don't know. I don't know anyone who doesn't feel imposter syndrome. No guidebook or guide.
I like
somebody
the
competing
politics
in.
of the institution. I like that.
Yeah, yeah,
I like that because I've worked in a number of organizations, and some have very open cultures, and some have very rigid
yeah,
cultures set in stone, which are inflexible and very reluctant to change, and
yeah,
outdated sort of structures,
yeah,
which makes them much less responsive to change, less likely to become
yeah,
early adopters of problems,
yeah.
of addressing problems. So I think that's a very good one, actually.
Yeah, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So whatever we decide on pushing, we need to make sure we're not only putting in some strategic stuff around governance, but also really kind of thinking about how do you get that flat, open system where new ideas can be had, and it's not heresy to suggest a different leadership style. Camilla, do you think we should go? I'm just aware of time. Should we go to our last question,
Yeah, should we
which
do
is the
that?
big one?
That's the kind of crux of the matter,
I'll give
isn't
this
it?
one. So Camilla, over to you.
Thank you. Right, guys, let's have your thoughts. We're now wanting to think about what you think needs to change. What would make a difference and enable more women or greater diversity in senior leadership in pediatrics? I can see
Remembering that, yeah, and
the
we really want
typing.
to take this to IPALA, don't we? We want to actually use this to help us thinking about IPA. What you need to see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Camilla, what do you think needs to change?
I look, I don't think there's going to be a single thing that we can do to change. It's going to be lots of small incremental changes. And I'm actually be interested to know what younger people think. Where I'm sitting, I already sense that there are some hopeful green shoots of change happening. I was talking, we've got an absolutely amazing chair of our trainees committee at the Royal College of Pediatrics and Child Health, and she's just currently on maternity leave. And I was so fascinated. Her husband's not medical, but they're going to do a mixed parental leave to enable her so that their child can be looked after for the first year of his life by parents, but that they're splitting it between the two of them, and that means she'll come back to work in the sort of really, because I don't know, I always remember coming back to work after maternity leave and just being absolutely paralyzed with fear about the nursery calling me, and and I know that really prevented me from taking on pretty much anything more than clinical work. And I was so fascinated to listen to her. And her husband works for a big city law firm. So, you might have thought they would have had views about one of their male employees taking parental leave, but no. And he is going to be on a full salary for his parental leave. So I'm just wondering whether there are some green shoots in our younger pediatricians of changes in attitude, because I think it's these small structural things that will just free up more women to start aspiring to take on leadership roles, potentially at a younger age. But anyway, that I'm just throwing that out.
I think it's great. There's some great stuff. I love to know what team crash tackle is, which I think is kind of changing the whole system. But there's a lot around shift from the expectation of a heroic committed leader who's always working, always available and expert at everything. Because I agree, you want to be available for your team, but if you work in your team in a truly distributive leadership fashion, they also, a good functioning team will manage without you and want you out of their way. I agree about not women are all mothers, but equally skilled in being in a group. Part-time leadership roles, job share. I saw people doing that. I think people talked about being encouraged into leadership, but with an acknowledgement of with some help around how you get around obstacles. I think the financial support is really interesting in terms of taking on a lot of our leadership positions are pro bono with minimal financial support.
I think that's a real problem, Sue. Sorry to interrupt you. Kind of the pro bono thing, because I think when you do work pro bono, if you've got significant caring responsibilities at home, then actually it's eating into the time that you'd be spending literally with your kids or with your elderly parents or whatever. And so I think it comes back to, and I think you made this comment about the fact that leadership is so often seen as a soft skill. If we start seeing it as a core skill, then we would put value on it, and we wouldn't be expecting people to develop in their sort of spare time. So I think that might be one of the structural changes that we need to be arguing.
Yeah, agreed. So it looks like I'm trying to do this, but there's sort of role modeling, there's exploring other models. So it's role modeling by women, and I would say flexible men as well, because I certainly know some young male leaders that I work with who are getting very burnt out with the current models that we have. More flexibility, teaching
That
people,
visibility question. How many times don't you hear after the fact that there's been a leadership role made available, but only some people knew about it and not all? And I think we've got to stop that. There's so much of this kind of back corridor conversations, or people get
the
more
networking.
It's not fair at all.
No, I agree. Alicia and Kevin, I think this is as far as Costas and Camilla and I got in terms of our thinking of how this session might go. And what?
It's absolutely terrific. There's heaps of ideas on that. On that
I
slide.
think we've got enough for a thematic analysis of things we can suggest to IPALA and IPA and go in the Leadership Academy.
Yeah, one thing that strikes me is that the so many of the themes that have come out over these 3 days have been expressed in those comments. I remember Camilla talking about the need for kindness in the way we interact, and I think Richard Horton's written on this in the editorials in the Lancet, and that sense of non-oppositional team working. In my experience in the leadership role, I've often found there's been quite a lot of tension and adversarial encounters between senior people and between clinicians and management. That needs to change. And I think, Camilla's point about, or Costas's point about saying to people in the workplace, in the clinical setting, they need to be making decisions and not those managers who are well removed. And that sense of integration of those at the coalface with kindness and humility with each other, I think that will help support more women leadership, because it's a terribly isolating place, isn't it, to be in senior leadership.
This is where I would,
and
that's where I would argue the job sharing of senior leadership. I still argue that can be done. You get at least 3 people for 2, but it also starts. You've got someone to bounce an idea off and go, "Am I crazy? Should we try this? How do you think the team will go with this?" And that sponsoring of those future leaders underneath you, so they can shadow you and actually follow. Because you're right, it's isolating, it's scary, it's uncomfortable. And then if people fall over, you then have a leadership vacuum, and then that's a disaster for the team and for your patients and everyone, really.
Yeah, and the burnout that leaders experience is not pleasant, is it? Many people don't recover from that. It's quite a serious issue. So we absolutely need to rethink how leadership's happening. And I think the fact that we've got a male-dominated, rather adversarial system, it's not helpful. And no wonder people don't want to go into leadership. I'm seeing around me more and more very capable and talented young pediatricians, particularly women, don't want to get into leadership because they see it as being too damaging. What's that about? That's terrible.
When it can be wonderful. And I think actually we do need to say that, like that first question, it can be really wonderful. It's a really special thing and a great privilege to do, to lead a great team. I'm sure Constance and Camilla, we all feel that way, and you, Kevin, we all feel it. Alicia, you've got to become a leader. It's a great thing.
Alicia's already a leader, actually. So
I know, but later on she's going to take our jobs. It's like...
I think I can speak to the importance, though, of having, mentors and people that you can look up to that are in those roles and that have led the way for us. And I think this sentiment came out in the Slido, in that quite a few people, said that seeing people do it before them and lead the way is very inspiring to them and helps them feel that is a path that they can possibly tread as well. And I think that's what I've been so lucky to have throughout my career so far, is some really strong mentors who have built me up and shown me that I can absolutely do it, and that that there's room for me at the table. But I think, people such as yourselves and everyone that we've had speak at this conference so far, just need to keep doing what you're doing, encouraging the next generation to have a seat at the table and to get involved. And the more people that we have doing that, I think the more ability we have to welcome leaders from all walks of life to share their perspectives and to help us change the system.
And I do think a thing we could say that Costas's point about safety and quality, I don't think this is just a nice idea. I don't think this is just about getting more female, more gender equity. I actually think this is better for our patients and a quality and a safety issue. Sorry, Camilla.
No, I couldn't agree with you more, Sue, but I was also just going to say I'm very conscious that there are people in leadership roles, particularly women in leadership roles around the country, around the world, where actually it's really lonely. And so the value of this event, and hopefully we can, potentially think about how we might, maybe in a less structured way, provide some ongoing support. There's just something about coming together, sharing ideas.
There you go.
When you start thinking, God, I'm going mad, or I'm crap, or whatever it is, you then meet a few other like-minded people, and you come away just fired up, re-energized, ready for the next. So I think the idea of having a group around you that, even if you're just meeting every other month, I think that was
That's a great idea.
And I agree. And one of the strong themes that's come through is the importance of mentoring. And I wonder if we need an active program to mentor young women paediatricians into leadership, those that are interested, but actually selectively say to young women, look, we can help support you and find you mentors, or just because I think that's clearly an important element in supporting people. And so we probably could get a bit more systematic about that.
Yeah, I agree.
I think mentoring starts from the ward, doesn't it? Because leadership is a broad church. Not everyone's going to be college president or be a chief exec of the trust. As senior clinicians, we're leaders at the shop floor, and some are suited to that and are happy with that. And then by teaching how to be around people, how to lead people, how to be in an emergency, how to take people under your wing that are struggling and prop them up in times of need, that's leadership. And if you can, if you have the appetite to do what Camilla did and go all the way to the top, great. But you don't have to do that. But you are all leaders in your own right. But it starts from the ward, and you set the tone from the ward. And through life, I've learned from people that trained me as to how to do things, and some others taught me exactly how not to do things, and therefore I've avoided repeating that behavior. So everyone's taught me. But so that's on us. That's on every single one of us.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we've probably sort of got as far as we can at this juncture. I do want to make a few closing comments if I can be afforded that luxury. Firstly, I want to thank the speakers that have contributed today, but also the other 2 days. It's just been an amazing group of people, and I feel so humbled to be able to work with such talented, capable people. And I think that's inspiring to me, and I hope it's inspiring to those people who've been online. So thank you so much for the speakers. I also need to thank the team that have actually made this happen, which is Alicia, who's on screen, and Vicky, who's close by, and Richard, who's been doing an amazing job with the technology in the Opala group. These are wonderful people who've contributed their time and skills tirelessly, and I'm very, very grateful to them. I think Alicia particularly has been very strong in encouraging this. And it was Sue's idea back from the Leadership Academy to do she had termed the idea of reimagining leadership, and sort of said, let's do something about this. I think we would like to think that there can be some continuation of this in some way, shape, or form. Very happy to receive feedback from the people who've been online about ideas that you got moving forward. One thing perhaps is that perhaps at the IPA meeting, which is in Mexico, and maybe a lot of people were not able to get there, but we would quite like to have a face-to-face workshop for a day to pick up some of these themes and move them forward, because we do want some continuity, but acknowledging that getting to Mexico is not that easy for many people. Being online is much easier. So very happy to receive feedback. But this is such an important issue that I think this is a really good beginning, but we need to just keep moving forward with it. And I think we've had some ideas tonight. Please think it through and feel happy to write to me or to the IPALA group about ideas you've got. And I think Rich has just put up about think about joining IPALA as a member and helping to grow that as a small group of pediatric leaders and academics trying to foster good leadership and academic aspects of child health, because that's so important. So I don't know whether Alicia or Vicky or Richard want to say anything. You done?
Oh.
Okay. Look, thank you, everybody. It's been a fantastic journey, and thank you, everyone, so much, and all the best for your future clinical and professional work. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye,
guys, for
everybody.
bringing us
Thank you.
together.
Bye, thank
Bye,
you.
everyone. Thanks.